My name's Rachel McFarlane. I'm a senior product support specialist here at Wellfound, and we're really excited to have you all with us for our Wellfound Presents Future Proof Your Tech Job Search webinar with our guest speaker, Jayme Karr. We're really excited to have Jayme here, and in a minute, I'm going to introduce her and let you know a little bit more about what she offers, and we love it. So it's going to be great. Before I launch into that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what Wellfound is. Most of you probably have a Wellfound account, but a few of you may have joined through other networks or through social media invitation. So I just wanted to let you know what Wellfound is. Wellfound is a jobs marketplace that specializes in hiring for startups, but also for public tech companies as well. We've been around for more than a decade, and it's a amazing tool for people who are looking for jobs within tech roles. So we've made over 8 million matches. In our system, we have 150,000 tech jobs available for applications. And it's because of our history of being connected to AngelList when it first came out. And it's known by founders around the world as a place to hire for their growing teams. So we encourage you to take a look. Alejandro is going to link in our chat. We've got a few, sorry, I should mention, I've got a few other people on the call from Wellfound. Alejandro and Megan are also here from our product support team. We represent people that you'll actually connect with. If you ever have any questions about Wellfound, you're going to get an actual human on the other side, and it's probably one of us. So Alejandro is going to put in the chat a few guides throughout the webinar to help you with tools in Wellfound, but also tools that Jayme is mentioning that are going to be helpful in your job search and application process. So in Wellfound, we make it really easy. You build a profile, you're able to search for jobs. We have great tools for finding remote jobs and also surfacing jobs that are like fitting your criteria as far as salary and equity goals. We make it super easy to apply and to screen with recruiters. So on this webinar today, we're going to go through a lot of content. We're going to try our best to make as much time as we can for question and answer. I'm going to let you know a little bit about Jayme. Then we're going to launch into talking about resume tips and a live resume critique just for a couple of resumes that we received. We're going to talk about formatting and keywords, common mistakes to avoid, and also leveraging AI in applications. So the do's and don'ts of using some of those new tools to help you out with your applications. It's a new scene out there, so we're going to try to give you the best guidance that we can. Then we're going to talk a little bit about staying relevant in tech. So pivoting into AI or, sort of amending your resume to fit new industries, some of the top AI tools and building custom agents. We're going to talk about effective networking strategies. And the last topic, which I'm really excited about because we don't give it enough attention, is how to self-advocate for yourself in the job market. And Jayme has some really encouraging ideas about that. So I'm excited to hear them. And then we'll talk about your questions and answers. So from the invitation intake form, a lot of you provided amazing questions for us. I've collated those into some questions for Jayme to answer that we'll ask as long as they haven't already been covered by the webinar. But if you have any additional questions, please put them right into the chat. Megan and Alejandro will try their best to answer your questions if they're kind of quick ones about like just how to send applications or some of the tips that we've learned from doing many webinars that are based on candidate questions. But if they're broad questions, we might save them for the end for Jayme to answer live so that everyone can hear the response. If we don't get to everything, I am going to send you a follow-up email that will include a lot of the links that Alejandro is sending, a copy of the webinar video, and then also any other, kind of resources that we think are going to be helpful for you. So with that in mind, let me tell you a little bit about Jayme. Jayme is a director of recruiting at Quantum. She has over a decade of experience in tech recruiting. She's recruited for Apple's Siri team. She's hired over 50 leaders for companies like Spotify, Amex, and FanDuel, and many seed and Series A startups as well. She later joined Genie's, an NEA-backed generative avatar gaming startup, which I find hard to say, scaling it from 24 to 200 employees. She's now at Quantum, and she's building teams in emerging fields like autonomous systems, AI, machine learning, generative AI, and blockchain. Thank you so much for joining us, Jayme. We're really excited to have you here.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for the kind introduction, Rachel, and extra thanks to the rest of the Wellfound team. I've always been a huge fan of the Angel List and the Wellfound product, and I'm super honored to be here and excited to share some tips and tricks on navigating this crazy job market and how to position yourself up for success when it comes to this whole evolution of AI.
Awesome. We're really glad to have you here. So we were going to start by talking about how to optimize your resume and personal branding. You're going to let us know a little bit about improving your resume, optimizing your social presence, and building a personal brand. Do you want to start with our resume tips here?
Yeah, that sounds great. So starting off, kind of explaining this concept of a 6-second rule. They say that recruiters and hiring managers often make their decision in only 6 seconds. So what that means is it's super crucial to have your resume grab their attention instantly. The first thing that you want to do is start with a very strong summary, a summary that is super concise, impactful, and air-free. You need to make sure that all of your links to your socials actually work. There's a ton of times I click on someone's LinkedIn, especially if you have a very common name, and you just want to make sure that everything's working in that regard. And then another thing is using numbers as much as you can to showcase accomplishments. For instance, instead of putting like reduced cloud costs, you can say something very specific like reduced AWS costs by 8% through implementation of Terraform. It really helps paint the picture of what you've done. A rule of thumb is 75% of your bullet points should follow a formula such as numbers, action, and results. And ensure that your formatting is consistent. Really clean formatting can either, it can really make you, and then bad formatting can really break you. So make sure you use clean fonts, make sure your bullet points are all consistent. And definitely the one thing that I would say here is use your time wisely. Don't just spam your resume to every single role. Make sure that the compensation expectations are aligned. Make sure that the leveling is aligned. You don't want to waste your time interviewing for roles that are beneath you. And the last thing that I would say is that I see a lot in regards to resume mistakes is taking credit for something that an entire team did by using the wrong kind of description words. And sometimes AI can accidentally do this in the wrong way, where instead of saying, hey, I supported or I collaborated with, it might say I led or executed. And so the one time I saw it was like a junior PM at like a Fortune 500 company, and their resume claimed that they took this entire Fortune 500 company through an agile Scrum like transformation, and it's just super unrealistic, and it might get through a recruiter, but it's definitely not going to get through the hiring manager.
Got it. That's great. And we have a few tips for success here. Some of this you've already mentioned, I think, but is there anything else you want to expand on?
I think one thing I wanted to mention that was on the last slide is just like keywords and ATS optimization. I think the best way to understand what words a recruiter might filter out is actually using the language that is listed on the job description. It can be a little bit daunting, but as much as you can to personalize that or to have archetypes of different resumes, the better. Why this matters is many companies, especially larger ones, although some recruiters that starter companies might see every single resume, it's almost impossible for like a recruiter at Meta to review every single resume. So they rely on certain keywords, technologies. And so definitely use the job description to export the needed keywords, but make sure you're staying honest.
Definitely. And one thing I wonder about mentioning here is you had some notes about ATS keywords and like descriptions, about aligning it with those tools that recruiters use. Do you have any advice for that?
Yes, we'll get on it a little bit later in regards to how to use AI for that specifically. But I think for this, just like the rule of thumb is if they're kind of talking about cloud technologies and their technology is AWS and you have AWS, you want to make sure that you're specifically calling out cloud AWS, for example. And then going into a little bit more about tips for success. To my earlier point, like making your results and impact very obvious. The best way to do this is to think of your impact in percentages, dollar amounts, time saved. And then you also want to make sure that your objective and summary crafts the story around your passions and your values, and making sure it not only showcases what you've done, but what you want to do in the future. And so again, the hiring manager can paint the picture of what you want to do and determine if it aligns with what they can provide you in their company.
I put in a little note here about making sure that any of these tips that Jayme is sharing with us should also be applied to your well-found job profile, and that would count for any job profile in any job marketplace. This is often summarized visually, as you can see on the left-hand side of this slide, to recruiters in this way, and can actually be the first thing that they look at rather than your resume directly. So try to apply the same tips there too.
Oh, absolutely. I think Wellfound is an awesome like an awesome way to get recruiters to actually reach out to you. So it can actually take a lot of the work out, but it's also a great tool to see what companies are hiring that might be relevant for your future. Going into optimizing your profile, you definitely want to ensure consistency across all platforms. You know, some hiring managers are super particular. And so if you have a month or a date off, they're going to be a little bit suspicious. So you want to make sure that everything is that you can control to eliminate any doubts that you're doing. Another thing is I see sometimes people working at startups and they don't actually tag that company on LinkedIn. I would do that as the best of your ability. This just makes your profile look a lot more polished, and then the recruiter can see the environments that you've been a part of. Another kind of like pro tip is if your company has gone through an acquisition, to put that into the summary, because it's always cool to see candidates who've gone through that. And then it may not be obvious. And then make sure that your profile picture gives a really good first impression. You want it to be friendly, you want it to be professional. Sometimes I see photos and they look rather careless, like extremely like blurry, and that might make people feel that you might be half-assing your actually assignments. And also take a look to make sure it doesn't look like a mugshot, because that's not good. It's and then lastly, I think that just taking advantage of the About Me section, again, in the same capacity or the same regard of your resume objective, painting that picture about what you're passionate about what drives you, could really help recruiters and hiring managers understand if their role is aligned or not.
Awesome. Great tips. So you had some tips also on personal brand assets, which I think are really relevant, especially now as these additional like supplementary tools for someone's profile and resume.
Oh, absolutely. And then on this point, you know, one of the biggest questions I get is how can I compete with the candidates from the Ivy League schools? How can I compete with the people from the FANG companies? And my top advice is to build deep like expertise in the matter of the companies that you want to join. And so if you're targeting a role at a gaming company, focus on understanding that industry. Have a blog around the kind of knowledge that you've accumulated. Have a GitHub that showcases your contributions to that specific industry. You could even go and take a Unity course and then create a mini game to showcase on your GitHub if you want to get into like the gaming field. The more examples that you can have of real world examples in your work can really set you apart. I mean, it can almost make you more valuable and more relevant than those individuals who might have different signals of excellence. And so one thing that you can do outside of GitHub and blog, and it was specifically more designers were more making these like portfolios. But if you're a front end or a design or a product centric engineer, it's not a bad idea to make your own portfolio website to showcase and to make it very obvious the type of variety of projects that you've led and worked on. One thing about that is if you're a front end developer, definitely make a website. Don't utilize Notion or make a PDF. You want to showcase that you can build things that operate and work. And so think about that before you try to use like a Notion or something to build out your portfolio.
I love that. It's an example of what you can do, so you want to use it.
Yeah, and I've known a lot of folks who who put themselves out there. They created YouTube channels or TikTok videos, and they're at the Googles and the Metas of the world with that alone. And so you really can get really far if you just put your brand out there and become an expert. And I hate to use the word expert, but become more than average in regards to your knowledge base.
Well, and I guess showcase it, have these things that people can watch and look at and see your aptitude for it.
Oh,
A lot.
totally. Another example is, there's this kid, he's 17 years old, and he was obsessed with like sneaker bots, like, beating the people at the Nike to
Oh
the
yeah.
best, like rare sneakers. And so he was just obsessing over different Discord channels. And so he started to like compete with other people's sneaker bots. And then he ended up getting an offer at his dream company that flew him to New York. And he started before he was even 18 years old.
Wow.
And so there's things that like now and in the future, like it's pretty limitless of the objectives that you could set for yourself.
I love that that's also just based on your personal passion. Like follow what you most want to be working on, and maybe that will help you work in at least a relevant field or relevant industry that matters to you too.
Oh, totally. And it's going to feel a lot less work. If you're obsessed with music, then build a better version of Spotify and then reach out to the people at Spotify and be like, hey, I built this thing and I would love to kind of like work at Spotify. Who can I meet that's hiring? And they might see it and be like, oh, wow, like this person gets it.
Love that. Is it okay if we move on to the next slide?
Yeah.
So I guess the next task is that we were going to take a look at these two resumes and get your immediate feedback on looking at them. We chose these two specifically because they're quite different from one another and the way that they've been formatted, even though they're not that different in what roles they're looking for. So I know you pre-looked at them. So we've got this one, and maybe I'll just like quickly um,
Got
just
it.
case this one.
Um,
This one is four
okay.
pages, and the first one is one page. So quite a big
Okay, well,
difference.
first thing, I'll start with the strengths. And then I'll say like one or two strengths, and I'll say like two things in regards to improvement. The strengths here is I do think that the section in regards to experience is super detailed. I can tell what this person did. I can tell if they were working remote or not. I can tell what the company did, which is actually really helpful in painting that picture. I do see a lot of impressive metrics as well, like reducing productivity time, increasing daily volume, like equals impact. So I like that. Now, areas for improvement is the there's not like a clear or a decisive objective. Like the resume could definitely help the hiring manager understand what they're looking for. I think most software engineers who are based in the US are looking for like a senior IC, like that can mean anything. And so I would probably encourage them to be like looking for a role in fintech or AI. Or looking for I do like it says senior individual contributor, but I think it could be like in something more impactful. And then I think in regards to this is just like very stylistic, and I see this a lot. But making sure that all of your sentences, if it's a former role, is like in past tense and making that really consistent. And then, yeah, I think that is good for now. I think in regards to this resume, but overall, awesome experience.
Yeah, definitely. We're not critiquing the experience here. I guess we're critiquing how it's presented. And I love
Yeah.
what you said about the last one, about trying to like be able to picture right away where you would put that person maybe in your company. Like where do they fit in if they were stronger about that description? I think that's really a strong thing to emphasize. So what about this one?
Now, this one is kind of the opposite. So I see why you kind of picked one. This one, the kind of like objective is brief, but it's super to the point. I can kind of get a little bit more of what this person has done. Again, I do think that they could be a little bit more descriptive of like what they want to do next. The one thing is like senior Java full stack developer, but looking at their background, they're highlighting a lot of other technologies. And so I almost think it would be better if they just say senior full stack developer. So then that way they're not considered with other technologies because most engineers are pretty tech agnostic, and I could tell that they're using other languages. And so I would probably just make that a little bit more general. And we got to talk about the length. 4 pages is quite long. I think that there is a lot of like redundancy in most of these roles. And so I would try to tailor it to about 2 pages tops. I do like the skills box, but I think that that could be formatted in a smaller table. And then again, I noticed a few kind of like verb tense past roles that weren't extremely consistent.
Yeah, I think that the skills section we get a lot of questions about in like past candidate webinars and things like that. Just not knowing because I think people know that it's important for like an ATS to read that your skills match, and I think that might be why that we're seeing these really big skills sections. So I just wonder, definitely smaller. Do you think like these subtitles are helpful, or do you think like a tech recruiter like yourself would be able to scan it quickly and kind of know where they would apply?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I don't think the methodologies really make sense here unless you're like a PM or a QA engineer. Um, I think that you could probably put this on a table and it would be a lot smaller
Got it.
opposed to the way it's spaced.
So more about the real estate it takes
But
up.
I do think that having a skills box, I highly recommend having one on your resume.
Yeah. And
And I do like the education. I like that the education just pops out. I don't have to like search for it. That's also a pro.
awesome. Okay, great. I think definitely like tech stack is something that we've heard over and over again is so important for recruiters to be able to like get it right away. So anything to do to make that easier seems really helpful. Thank you
Yeah.
for taking a look at those. So the next section we were going to talk about is leveraging AI in job applications, and I know we've gotten so many questions about that. We've also seen as support people different ways of doing it that don't look correct. So I'm really excited for this section. So you're going to start by talking about using AI tools and what things you
Okay.
actually support.
Cool. Yeah, starting with the AI dues. I think it's getting to the point now that people can't imagine a world without technologies like ChatGPT. And I think it's important for the same reasons why students should do their own homework at school. It's crucial for you to do some things on your own as well, right? You can't rely on AI to do everything, but these are some things that I think that I do recommend to use AI. The thing that I probably use AI the most, and I think that some people are like, oh, I didn't think about that, is as a research tool. Leveraging AI to research companies, spot industry trends, and also you can, going back to earlier point, like extracting important keywords from job descriptions. Like what I would say is the more you know about the market, the more you know about companies, the more you know about the companies that you're interviewing for specifically or that you want to interview for. This knowledge really will help you in regards to the interview in general, and then it'll help you spend your time wisely. And then we'll get into it like a little bit later, but it'll also help you kind of beat everyone else the punch when it comes to applying as fast as you can. Secondly, using AI to educate yourself on topics that you don't fully understand or comprehend. This could be a great use case for maybe a designer or a PM that they know that they're never going to be an AI engineer, but they still want to expose themselves to these technologies. And so it may sound silly, but like asking these AI like LLMs to explain things to you like you're 10 years old or 15 years old, I find super helpful. I did this when the Transformers came out and the Stable Diffusion came out. And just having those kind of like examples in my head really helped me understand what the technology does. And you can find your own way about this. Maybe it's not a 10-year-old, maybe it's a different age, or maybe it's a different picture that you want to be able to paint. And there's some really cool tools that educate you that can educate you. Essentially, they're like text to course prompts. And so you can say like, hey, create a course about SRE. And then all of a sudden, in a matter of like 2 minutes, it'll spit out a course. And so I'll look at it at the end of what the one I use is called. It's like a logo of an octopus. I would highly recommend that. And then you can also leverage it to like ask ChatGPT or the LLMs that we'll get on later is like, oh, what newsletters should I subscribe to? And on that note, I do think Wellfound has a really great newsletter. It's
Yeah.
wink, wink. So that's something that I would encourage you to do. And then going into, I think that some of the obvious points is like enhancing your content. Like there's really no tolerance for spelling or grammar or syntax errors right now. I just feel like people think it's extremely lazy. Although I think on the contrary, some people think using AI is lazy, but I think you just want to double check. Also with like just professional clarity and tonality. Like if you're a hiring manager, then you should make sure that your job descriptions or anything that you have in your website or your portfolio is not misunderstood in the wrong way or coming across in the wrong tone. So using ChatGPT to understand what tone you are naturally portraying and then learning from that. And then what I would say is don't just leverage the copy and paste of what this LLM is spitting out. I would try to train yourself to ask in the prompt, don't tell me the answer, walk me through why you made these edits and these suggestions so you can have a growth mindset and you can learn. Or it's just, again, you're not doing your own homework and the test is going to come and you're going to fail the exam. And then another thing is you can use AI to, I would create a template that you think is really great for maybe reaching out to hiring managers or reaching out to recruiters or people at the companies that you want to work at, and then helping you tailor it to different audience. So maybe you're really good at writing the one for the recruiter, and then you can kind of ask ChatGPT to tailor it to the hiring manager at the respected company. And so I think that that can save you a lot of time using these AI generated templates, which you personalize depending on who you're talking to. And then the last thing that I would say, I think that this could be a slide on its own. And there's probably a lot more technical folks that could provide a little bit more suggestions. But encouraging you to build out your own custom agents. You can use platforms like ChatGPT or U.com. And when you pay for the premium versions, you can build out these like mini AI agents that are very specialized to different tasks. And so what you can do is you can feed it all of the information about your strengths, your accomplishments, your career goals. You could even put your like performance reviews in there. And then it knows everything about you. And then you can use that same agent with all this context about you to compare your experience and your background to certain jobs and ask it for a rating score. Hey, and if you notice that all of your rating scores are like 75, 80%, then try to figure out if there's any patterns of maybe some growth opportunities. Maybe all of the jobs that you want are looking for experience in a certain domain. How can you go take the earlier advice to get that domain and kind of decrease that knowledge gap?
I love that. I love the growth mindset, like using those tools to point out these areas that you can improve on.
And the one last thing, and this is my favorite use case of AI, is using voice AI. I think that sometimes like practice makes perfect, and sometimes you might practice with a friend or a family member, and they're just sometimes going to tell you what you want to hear. Oh, no, that's great. AI is not going to lie to you. And so you can practice interviews with AI. You can actually generate maybe difficult questions that the interviewers might ask on the job description using that agent. And then what I would say is practice with the difficult questions. So then when the average questions come to you, you can kind of tackle them no problem. And then you can do some role play with the AI. It can give you immediate feedback. And then I learned that I do and like a lot. If you haven't noticed, AI helped me kind of have awareness of that. And then you can do the same practice and practicing negotiations or asking your boss for promotion. And so I think that using voice AI is one of my favorite use cases right now.
I didn't even think of that. That is really an exciting tool. What about some of the don'ts? I think some people are hesitant to use some of these because we hear people, and even there's some job postings that say we love AI, but we don't want you to write your resume using it. Like they have notes like that sometimes. So
Yeah.
what are the things that maybe we should avoid?
Yeah, I would say you need to use AI tools as a support, not a substitute to your uniqueness. We've all seen the posts and the resumes that are like overly polished or generic or using words that like you never use in a conversation. And they just like scream totally ChatGPT. Maybe it's a ton of emojis and you're like, yeah, this person just fed it. And it's a little bit like it just takes away from the knowledge that you actually probably did put in organically. And then it just masks it with this assumption that this person's just going to use AI for everything. And so my advice to that is make sure you're being authentic. Answer the questions around why you want to work at the company. Do not use AI for that because it's a huge missed opportunity. In the same way, don't ask AI to build out your LinkedIn summary. Like they don't, like AI doesn't know you. It's just going to take away your like voice and your ability to be authentic, which it will last like a better impression.
Awesome. I love that. We want to hear people's voices. Um, so maybe we have an AI tip slide here, but maybe you've actually covered most of this.
Oh, yeah, I think I did. It's
Yeah, I
just,
think you did. I'm just scanning it quickly.
oh,
Yep.
and one thing on this, like you.com, I think the premium version is like same price as ChatGPT, but you have access to like 20 plus LLMs. And so experiment with the one that you like. Some people prefer Gemini from Google, others prefer like Claude. I like Claude for writing, but then you can also use ChatGPT. So experiment with them, see what kind of fits your kind of like the UI that you prefer. And they're all a little bit different. I would say like all LLMs kind of have their own culture.
Yeah, it's interesting. They have their own personalities a bit.
Hmm.
Okay, great. Sorry, my mouse is really sensitive and it keeps jumping slides. Um, I love those tips. Thank you so much. So the next section we wanted to talk about is just how to level up and stay relevant in the job market. And I think because there's so many changes, especially with AI and LLMs, they're just, you know, there's a big seismic change in some of the opportunities that are there. So this is a really relevant question. We got a lot of questions about this. So you had some advice on different ways in which we can stay relevant and
Oh
some
yeah.
set tips too.
From my experience, and I think others will agree with this, like those who get promoted the quickest are usually considered like experts in that field. Like bosses will be like, oh, go to so and so for that information. And it's not because they have a PhD, it's just because they are on the weekends or at night taking courses or watching YouTube videos or watching TED Talks or whatever it is. And so we've already discussed kind of building a strong GitHub profile and working on side projects. But another thing to do, especially if you're non-technical, is investing in courses. And it both goes for if you're non-technical or technical in regards to certifications. I mean, the world right now, the beauty of it is you don't have to go to MIT or Harvard to get lessons from those same professors. You can get access to those courses from platforms like Coursera or EDX, and they're literally the exact same class, the exact same content. So it's pretty awesome. And if you are employed, many employers will actually reimburse you for these skilling tools. And so make sure you ask. And Coursera, I think it's like $30 a month. That's nothing in regards to the investment that you can have on your future. And so that's one thing in regards to how you can up level is having those side projects and taking those courses. And it's not only just so you can have them on your profile, but it helps you build confidence. It helps you build that like knowledge so you can share it with your team, and then you do get recognized as the quote unquote expert or subject matter expert in that domain or in that field.
Awesome. And we've got a few certifications here. I think Alejandro's sharing some links in the chat as well. Um,
Perfect. And this is definitely not an agnostic list. These are just some that recently some hiring managers have called out.
yeah, and I think looking them up might help lead you to some other things that you might be interested in. So just sort of follow the thread. And so what about, you know, we've got some tips on like networking, building portfolios that might apply to these AI job transitions too.
Yeah, I love how this is like Bitcoin. It's Bitcoin is like crazy right now if you guys don't know, to take a look at it after the call. But in regards to like getting up leveled into kind of this stuff, I definitely agree. Some of these courses on here are going to be fantastic. Going into the next slide, I think one second. Yeah, I think that what's important is specifically if you're tech and you want to get into AI, contributing to open source projects. These are some of the libraries here, but this is another use case that you can use LLMs for. If you're a front end and an engineer, obviously like React and TypeScript and figuring out the open source projects to that. As a recruiter, like I'll look at a GitHub and I don't really know what a lot of stuff means. All I know is that something's very green, which means you have a lot of activity, and then I can see different things that you contributed to. And so building a kind of prioritizing the right type of projects and getting your GitHub activity is probably the best thing that you can do to get recruiters to notice you and hiring managers to notice you, and then trying to figure out how to build out real world skills and problems that are relevant to what you want to do. And so if you want to build out chatbots and then learn about natural language processing, if you're obsessed with drones, then maybe take as much as you can to learn about computer vision.
Um, Okay. Those are great tips. I'm so excited for people. I actually would love to like get updates on if anyone does any of these things after our webinar, like in a few weeks or something. Um, so I'm really excited for you to talk about this. I feel like we don't talk about it enough, and it's sort of a lonely experience applying to jobs, but what are the different ways that you can self-advocate in the job market? How do we build ourselves up to have these interactions and maybe long interview processes and all these things that we have to go through?
Totally. You know, interviewing can be super nerve-wracking for everyone. And I think that that is something that people forget. People forget that I think it's like 80% of people have imposter syndrome. And what's funny is like sometimes the interviewers, especially if they're like newer managers, they're just as nervous as you. And so you have to remember that everyone puts their pants on in the same way for the most part. And they're there because usually for like very positive reasons. And so in regards to like the number one thing that you could do for yourself is practice and prepare. And you know, many companies still, and I don't think that this is going to go away anytime soon, are still using super situational and star related interviews. And what star related interview is, hey, here's a situation, a task, action, and result type of question. And so they might ask you like, oh, tell me about a time that you had three critical tasks to complete with almost a impossible deadline. What did you do about that? And so my advice is going back to the earlier point of asking ChatGPT for these difficult questions. Ask it based on the job description. What are some star related questions that they might ask? And the more examples that you have, the more natural it's going to be because it's really hard to just kind of like wing it. And when you wing it, sometimes you fib a little bit, sometimes you miss out important details. And so the more that you can practice star related interviews, and maybe you're using the voice AI to do that, the more you're going to be confident. And one thing I would say is stick to the facts, stick to the work. Until you have an offer, like don't overly insert your personality. Like I think that being super sarcastic or super humorous has a place, and it's not in these star related interviews.
And then you had some tips on salary negotiation as well, I think, too here.
Oh, I thought that was well found.
Oh, yeah, maybe I added it. I think it was your note, but I also was pointing out that we do have a salary calculator. So one thing that happens during the interview process is that hopefully you lead to a moment where you're negotiating salary, and that part can be really intimidating for some people, and also it can be hard to be if you've been working in the same job for 4 years or something, you might be out of touch with what is the going rate for your position. So you can go into that with confidence and Alejandro is sharing the salary calculator that we have on our site there too that I think could be helpful. So I guess that was my point. Um,
Amazing.
and so we've got a few different tips here on mindset and self-talk that you put together for us too.
Yeah, I think that this is maybe my favorite and arguably the most important part of this entire webinar, which is essentially this point to remember that if you feel overqualified or underqualified, you're likely right, right? If you don't believe in yourself, impacts the way that others perceive you. And so if you doubt yourself, others might doubt you too. And I think that it might be like, oh, so well, it's easier said than done. I've had 5 interviews this week and none of them went well. And you can kind of build out this like negative narrative and this whole victim mentality. But the way that you need to see it is sometimes things are out of your control. If it's like raining or snowing, you're not going to blame yourself for that, right? And so what you need to understand is like this, what's called the 3R method, and recognize, reframe, and replace your negative thoughts to build a success-oriented mindset. And so I do think that a lot of this stems from a lack of confidence because they don't practice. And so if you do the work and you practice and the AI is giving you a thumbs up, I promise you, you're going to see immediate results and you're going to really believe in yourself and you're going to stop letting these setbacks getting you into this kind of like ability to not combat the self-doubt. And so mastering the skills where you feel the less confident. I have a huge fear of public speaking, and that's one of the reasons why I decided to do this webinar, because I know that I'll never get over it unless I put myself out there, right? And the way that I did that is I went to one of my best friend's birthday and I roasted him. And that was a huge success. And so you're putting yourself out there to become more confident, and then honing in on what your strengths are, and identifying those. And so I think that understanding your unique proposition and telling yourself that you can do it, opposed to all the reasons why you can't, is a huge, huge part of the process.
I love that. And I would imagine that while you're asking yourself those questions with the AI agent, you're also hearing how much you know, and that's like what's building your confidence and in yourself.
Oh, totally. And that goes into this whole point of like having a running database. It could be a journal, it could be a Google Doc, but having this like record of accomplishments. It could be things that maybe I probably do it in 2 different sections. I have one of things that I might put in a cover letter or a resume or I might boost in interviews, but then I just have like little accomplishments that I would probably never share with anyone, of so and so gave you recognition or so and so gave you a pat on the back or someone called you out on a Slack channel, and having all those things in a folder, having kind of LinkedIn endorsements or your references or your really positive performance reviews available, and then maybe finding a routine of reading those. I like to read mine like every quarterly, and I literally look at ones that were like literally 5 years ago. And so it helps you get into this state of like, oh no, I am really good at what I do. And I did do all these little things. And maybe it's just one of those things where you literally survived 5 interviews in a week and you can kind of give yourself kudos on that. So having like kind of a stories database is something that I highly recommend. And then also kind of power questions in the interview process in general. I think the questions that you ask really matter, and you should care enough to do your due diligence around if the company is even right for you. I think sometimes people get into this mindset of wanting as many offers as they possibly can for their own confidence, I don't think that that does any pro. If anything, now you have to say no to like three companies and then and pick one if you got four offers. And so try to understand where your time is being spent wisely. If you see a job description as 80K and you're making double of that, maybe don't interview for that company. And so within the interviews, you want to ask questions, for example, that show your market research and show that it's the right company for you. For example, it's a gaming company and you know that they're using AI. And you know everything about AI now because you took all these courses. You could be like, hey, so how are you competing with Roblox and Meta? And are you guys using Stable Diffusion? And maybe it's important to you because you want to use stable, you want to have that on your toolbox. And so asking questions that are again painting the picture and but also equally important to your own journey is going to be great. And what's going to happen is the person on the other side is going to appreciate your thoughtfulness and feel that you're being very selective and decisive, which people like decisive. People try to avoid folks who, for lack of better words, are kind of giving them a little bit desperation vibes.
Yeah, I guess it also just shows like this genuine interest in what they're interviewing for that goes beyond just reading.
Mhm.
That makes so much sense to me. Um,
Yeah, that's a really, really good segue in regards to if you're an engineer and they ask you why you're interested in this company and you're only listing off the tech stack, it's not going to go well with the CEO.
yeah, yeah, that makes so much sense to me. You need more connection than that. We are running pretty low on time, so maybe we can do kind of like the Coles notes of the next few slides and get to some questions. Does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, sure. So networking strategies, the one thing that I would just jump to that I think is the most important here is coming up with a follow-up like system. I think that the best networking people are really in the like follow-up game. And you know, when you ask job seekers for help, that takes a lot of time. And so making sure that you are giving them feedback or not feedback, but like updates of like, oh, thank you so much. That lead that you sent me, it didn't end up going through, but I really appreciate it. That's going to get them to give you another lead. And so coming up with a strategy and a spreadsheet of everyone that's kind of helped you and then also having like a Rolodex of recruiters at your disposal is super, super helpful. And then going to these networking events and having them meet the human flesh and not just the resume. People hire humans at the end of the day, not a piece of paper. And so doing that work, whether it's in person or Zoom, is going to be very, very beneficial.
Yeah, I love this cadence that you set up here too. I would have never thought of that. I'm such an organic person when it comes to communication that it makes perfect sense to lay it out that way. Um, and I think this kind of was the same advice that you just said, but maybe just want to quickly highlight hackathons and some of the things that they might um, get
Yeah,
involved.
hackathons, same result as like having a really good GitHub. Some companies specifically have hackathons to see who wins so they can hire them. And so if you're an engineer, you're interested in working at Salesforce or what have you, see what their hackathons are, impress them. You're most likely going to get expedited into their interview process.
Great advice. And then yeah, this sort of wraps up our slides, but like execute with urgency. Sorry.
Yeah, I feel like the job market is a race and you need to be militant. I hate to say it, but the people who unfortunately like they may not be an exact fit for what they want, but they have really high grits and they're going to do the work. You could definitely get an opportunity, right? And some of the ways to do that is to be the first wave of resumes. And so making sure that you are saving proper jobs on things like the job boards, making sure you're waking up early. And so trying to have like a 5-second rule of the minute that you see it, you are applying. So that might be having your resume like literally in your phone. So you could just like update it or upload it really fast, but you really need to treat it like you're Michael Jordan and he's about to get ready for like a basketball game or something. And so like acting fast and then doing things to eliminate all of the friction by having everything available, and then utilizing AI for those templates and what have you. And then yeah, just trying to figure out how you can focus on quality opposed to quantity is going to help you in the long run.
So yeah, that getting organized is so important. And Alejandro just sent into the chat a link to like how to set up job search alerts in
Oh,
our
cool.
system, which is a great way of staying on top of like the very first moments that a job has been posted, so you can apply right away.
Yeah, especially if you're interested in startups, I think Wellfound is probably one of the best portfolios for that, or job boards for that.
Thank you for saying that. I feel the same. But definitely there's different startups using different job boards. So you kind of want to be like making sure that you're on this one if startups are of an interest of yours.
And
And
if a recruiter reaches out to you, same logic goes. Get on their calendar as fast as possible.
love that. Make the time. So we've got 8 minutes left, but maybe we can go a little I have no idea what people's time are like. You let me know, Jayme, when we're getting close. But we've got some applicant questions here. I'm not seeing very many questions in the chat. It's making me a little nervous if people can write into the chat. Can
I'm
anyone?
just that thorough, I guess.
We could be
Let's see.
thorough. Any of our participants want to write hi into the chat would give me some. There we go. Okay, James
Hi,
wrote.
James.
James, hi. That makes me feel a lot better. Okay, I'm glad that we did that.
Tracy, how about non-technical roles? Oh, for
So
job boards? Still well found, right, Rachel? There's a ton of non-technical roles still on the
oh,
well found job board,
yeah, I
right?
mean, a list of kinds would be helpful if I could let you know, but definitely we have a lot of different kinds of roles in our system. Marketing, sales, business development, design, product managers, a lot of different kinds of roles, not just
Got
engineers.
it. One thing I would mention just for Tracy or anyone else listening, another good place is to go on Slack or Discord channels. So maybe it's like marketing in San Francisco meetups or Slack channels. Those are really great ways to network and to see different jobs that are being posted. But going into these questions, I think the first one and the third one are kind of pretty similar. So in regards to hiring managers, I do think that the way that this is written is funny because it's in the mentality of unsatisfied when it could just be a matter of the companies are running out of funding or what have you. But hiring managers need multiple rounds to assess candidates fully. They're looking for more than just skills. They're looking for like this perfect mix of experience and mindset and culture. And it could be sometimes a challenge to pick the best fit, especially with the influx of applicants these days. You could think of it as like finding a roommate. You don't want to just like hire someone with one person or even dating. Like sometimes you want your friends to meet them first, right? So you can kind of think of it and like it's a really, really big decision. And it's very costly for a company to hire somebody and then get it wrong. And so they might just be comparing really like several strong candidates. You were probably one of them, but there could be a bunch of factors. And I think that once you find the right role, you might even be grateful that you didn't end up at said company because that's just how life works. But just try to keep your mindset up and also do make sure that it's the right culture for you. For example, I like being in cultures that are really, really quick. And so if someone wasn't giving me feedback for like 3 weeks, I would already just tell them, hey, like, I don't think that this is going to work for me because I just know it's going to be a very, very slow paced company. And then going into how many steps are typical in a typical interview process. I hate to say it, but it's probably average of five,
Mhm.
5 steps that might not be including the recruiter screen. The more senior you are, the more rounds there will be. And then from a technical perspective, this can consist of a leak code, this consists of a system design. Some of them even consist of a working trial where you have to go in for an entire day and they pay you. And so every interview process is different. I heard this absolute crazy one with my friend who's a product manager for Web3 companies. He talked to 27 people
Yeah.
across six months, but he was also a director level. And he was happy to do it because he wanted to meet everyone. And so I would say take it as a positive that you get to have so much data points to make the right role for you. And I really like this question. I think that a lot of people maybe on this call might be going through this
Should be
in regards
about,
to the laid off
yeah. How do
comment.
I optimize my resume after being laid
Yeah.
twice in a year?
Um, I think that I'm gonna answer this a little bit in regards to resume, but then also just in interviews in general. First off, I'm sorry that happened to you. And I would recommend doing maybe some due diligence on the other companies you go to in regards to their financials. But my advice is just to remain in a power position, tell the truth. Well, if you end up at an interview, you can say, hey, like, I got laid off. It was shocking to me. Like I did not see it coming. My entire team didn't see me coming. 20 of us essentially got cut, and it was rather kind of like shocking to me. And then drive the conversation back to why your skills are aligned with their future. Because and you can say, it was really unfortunate, but maybe there's a silver lining because this role is exactly what I'd like to do. And correct me if I'm wrong, but sounds like you need a senior full stack to revamp your entire web. That's exactly what I did at this job. And so you're kind of painting the picture. And in your resume, I do think that if you were part of a large reduction, I would make that obvious because it wasn't about performance. It was probably about financial, and no one can blame you for that.
Love that. Yeah, we've been getting that question a little more frequently lately. So it's really helpful to have some advice on that. Um, let's see. Some of these we already have covered in the content, so maybe we'll move to some of the questions in the chat. I guess the only one that maybe would be helpful to air is just how much hands-on machine learning experience
Mm,
players expect, especially because some of this is still it's a new vanguard, moving forward. So as because there's an influx of all those companies, like what other things, I mean, we've talked a lot about how they can showcase their skills and interests through using GitHub and blogs and different projects that they're building on their own. Um,
yeah, I remember this question. It was a little bit longer, and it was specifically like how much specific direct experience do I have to have with AI opposed to third-party LLMs?
mm,
And I think that unless you're applying to like OpenAI or Perplexity, any AI exposure that you can have is going to be a plus. If you're a PM and you don't have any AI experience, but you really, really want it, what I would probably recommend doing is, especially if you're employed, is take on more AI related projects. And if that's not an option to you, just be a super user. Be like an entire super user around all of the LLMs that you can do. Keep updated in regards to what certain companies are doing. Keep updated on the job description of the technologies that they're showing. But I think a lot of companies, they might say that they want a PM in AI, and you may think that they want someone from those top labs. They generally speaking just want someone who could build out those workflows from a project management perspective. And so taking on the courses of like AI, generative AI for PM or generative AI for HR is going to be helpful.
mm,
And I think that you can still compete with maybe the people who are in that discipline at an AI company. At least you'll be able to talk the talk. And so not much hands-on, but more around the third party LLM exposure and knowledge around them and the differences. And just understanding what different terminologies are, like what is GPU? What is an ML compiler? What are the teams that are building chips versus like for a good example of this is like ChatGPT builds their own models, right? But Harvey AI uses ChatGPT to help lawyers. And so if you're applying to a Harvey AI, they're using ChatGPT anyway, so you should explore ChatGPT as a tool.
Got it. And yeah, I guess a lot of that is based on doing the research, which you kind of like emphasized throughout today.
And most of the job descriptions will state what LLMs are using. Very, very, very little are building this like in-house because it's extremely expensive.
Yeah. We are at time, but we have like just two questions in the chat. So I wonder if you've got a couple of minutes just to answer those, but we can also
Yeah,
wrap it up and we can get back to them.
absolutely.
So Tracy, I'm gonna ask her question just because it's sort of related to what we're talking about, like just sort of shifting experience for a role. She says she's found that even though I have background um, in marketing, payments, technology, I haven't worked for a traditional tech company, and it's hard to get those companies to understand that I'm still qualified. Do you have any suggestions for people who are trying to like get into some of these roles, like that industry shift at all?
Yeah, I would try to come up with a narrative around why it's applicable and build out an archetype of resume, or version of your resume that is like marketing payments, or like a traditional, what is it, like a they're one trying to get into like fintech, something that's like applicable to fintech, where like um you're trying to come up with the parallels and putting that into your objective and making it extremely obvious to someone who's in fintech. And then you can keep a modern like marketing payments technology resume as well if you still wanted to apply for those type of companies. But trying to kind of combat any rebuttals before the rebuttals come is going to be extremely helpful. And then maybe they think it's a marketing company, but they don't understand it's a payments company. And so maybe in parentheses being like B2B payments company or MarTech payments company, and just making it extremely obvious for the reader and the audience.
Yeah, and that probably also goes in line with just sort of like matching some of the language that you're seeing in the job descriptions that you're applying for too, which is something I think we recommend for most
Like, if it's a growth marketing role and you're like, I'm not a marketing expert, but you have a lot of growth marketing and then you're calling yourself like a digital consultant, it's not gonna translate. And so
they're not gonna be able to picture it, right?
yeah, try to be as specific as possible, especially if you have been acting as that role. And so there's a lot of people at Meta that are program managers and they're acting like product managers. And so they put product and program. And so if you're like a marketing manager, you may want to put just like different versions, or making it very clear the type of marketing that you've worked on, and probably bold in the very first bullet.
So thank you so much, Jayme. That actually is all of our questions. We've the other one you had already answered.
Oh, okay.
So we're good. We and I think that most of the other questions that we received through the intake were covered by what you talked about in the webinar, because we let that guide us in how we designed it, I guess, or how the content that you build for us. So thank you so much for all the time and dedication that you put into organizing this information for our candidates. We are so thankful. For the candidates that are in our audience today, I'll be sending out a follow-up email. Please do, maybe Alejandro, if you want to put into the chat our email for support. If anyone has any questions about starting a Wellfound account or continuing or anything else that you feel like we missed in this topic, feel free to reach out to us. We're just on the other side of the email or the chat when you're using Wellfound. And yeah, we'll be also sending a video recording of the webinar too. So if you feel like you missed something, don't worry too much. We're going to send you some resources and the recording as well. Thank you so
Awesome.
much, everyone who helped out today, to Alejandro, Megan, Senya, and Jayme,
Yes,
of course.
exactly. Thank you so much, everyone.
Great.
Bye.